On that day, they did not just laugh because they thought I was poor. They laughed because they were certain I would always be the family burden. They had no idea that the auction they had waited a lifetime for was merely a stage I had constructed to settle a final debt. When the gavel struck, the mansion my relatives believed was destined for them was sold to me, and that was only the first shock of the morning. My name is Quinn Mata, and if you asked anyone in Ravenwood County about me yesterday, they would have told you I was the poor relation, the girl who left town with nothing but a backpack and a chip on her shoulder. But today was not yesterday. Today was the day the ledger would finally be balanced, though the people standing on the manicured lawn of Silverhaven Manor did not know it yet. I stepped out of my sedan, a rental I had picked up at the airport an hour ago. I could have driven my own car, a vehicle that cost more than the combined net worth of half the people here, but that would have ruined the surprise. Instead, I wore a simple navy blazer over a white silk blouse and dark trousers. No jewelry, no designer logos screaming for attention, just clean lines and the kind of quiet confidence that usually gets mistaken for arrogance or, in my family's case, delusion. The air was crisp, smelling of pine needles and damp earth, typical for late October in this part of the state. The gravel crunched under my boots as I walked toward the entrance. Silverhaven Manor loomed ahead, a massive structure of pale limestone that seemed to absorb the sunlight rather than reflect it. It had a 6-column portico that looked like it belonged in a history book, flanking a front door dark enough to swallow secrets. For as long as I could remember, the Lane family had worshipped this house. It was their Mecca. My mother's side of the family believed that owning a property like this was the only thing separating them from the American aristocracy they so desperately wanted to join. I saw them before they saw me. It was hard to miss them. Aunt Loretta was holding court near the fountain, wearing a coat with a fur collar that was perhaps a bit too aggressive for a Tuesday morning auction. Flanking her were my cousins, the unholy trinity of my childhood torment. Brielle, Kayla, and Owen. They were grouped together like a defensive wall, laughing too loudly, projecting an image of wealth that I knew was held together by maxed-out credit cards and second mortgages. I tightened my grip on my handbag and kept walking. My heart did a strange little flutter, a phantom reflex from when I was 12 years old and terrified of upsetting them. I took a breath, held it for 2 seconds, and let it go. That heat rising in my chest was not fear. It was fuel. Owen was the first to spot me. He nudged Brielle, who turned, her face twisting into a sneer so practiced it looked like muscle memory. "Well, look who decided to show up," Owen called out. His voice carried over the murmurs of the crowd. He was wearing a suit that was too shiny, the kind of blue that hurts your eyes in direct sunlight. "Quinn, did you get lost on the way to the soup kitchen?" The group erupted into laughter. It was a sharp, performative sound, designed to draw attention. Several other potential bidders turned to look, their eyes scanning me, assessing my worth, and dismissing me in the same second. "Maybe she thinks they are handing out free samples," Brielle chimed in, looking me up and down with exaggerated pity. "You know there is a registration fee just to get a paddle, right, Quinn? It is not like the charity drives you are used to." I felt the eyes of strangers on me, that prickly sensation of being judged. The old Quinn would have looked down at her shoes. The old Quinn would have stammered an excuse and tried to fade into the hedges. I looked Brielle dead in the eye. I did not frown. I did not scowl. I just gave her a thin, polite smile, the kind you give a child who has just said something incredibly stupid. I walked past them without breaking my stride. I treated them like tourists in a city where I was the mayor. "Hey, I am talking to you," Owen shouted, his ego bruised by my silence. I kept moving toward the stone steps. The house itself was imposing. It had been vacant for 2 years, ever since the previous owner, an industrial tycoon, had been indicted for fraud. The windows were dark, but the potential was undeniable. It sat on 40 acres of prime land. The Lanes had been talking about this auction for 6 months. Every family dinner, every group chat I was excluded from, every phone call I heard about through the grapevine. It was all about Silverhaven. If they got this house, they said, they would finally have arrived. Aunt Loretta moved faster than I expected. She stepped directly into my path at the base of the stairs, blocking my way to the registration desk. Up close, I could see the heavy makeup settling into the lines around her mouth. She smelled of expensive perfume and anxiety. "Quinn," she said, her voice dropping to that sickly sweet tone she used when she wanted to cut you deep. "What are you actually doing here? This is embarrassing. For you." I stopped. "I am here for the auction, Aunt Loretta, same as you." She laughed, a short, harsh bark. "This place is not a liquidation outlet. Honey, these people play with big numbers. You cannot pay for a mansion with dreams and a sob story. Go home. Do not make us look bad by association when security escorts you out for insufficient funds." The gathered cousins snickered behind her. This was their favorite game. Remind Quinn of her place. Remind Quinn she is the charity case. I looked at Loretta. I really looked at her. I saw the fraying threads on her scarf. I saw the way her hand shook slightly as she clutched her clutch. She was terrified. She needed this house to prove she was somebody. I did not need anything from her. Not anymore. "Excuse me, Loretta," I said. My voice was calm, steady, and loud enough for the people around us to hear. "I have a schedule to keep, and you are standing in my light." Loretta blinked, her mouth opening slightly. She had expected me to cower. She had expected the apology. The sheer audacity of my dismissal made her freeze just long enough for me to step around her. I walked up the steps to the heavy oak doors where the auction staff had set up a long table covered in black cloth. The air inside the portico was cooler, shadowed. There were 2 lines, one for general spectators and curious neighbors, and one for registered bidders. I went straight to the bidder line. Brielle had followed me up the stairs, likely hoping to witness the moment I was turned away. She hovered near a pillar, pretending to check her phone but watching me like a hawk. A young man with slicked-back hair and a tired expression sat behind the laptop. He did not look up immediately. "Name and identification, please," he droned. "Quinn Mata," I said, sliding my driver's license across the table. He sighed, typed my name into his system, and then stopped. His fingers hovered over the keyboard. He blinked, leaned in closer to the screen, and then looked up at me. The boredom vanished from his face, replaced by a sudden, electric alertness. He straightened his tie and sat up taller. "Ms. Mata," he said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming respectful and hushed. "My apologies. We have been expecting you." I saw Brielle's head snap up. She had heard the tone shift. The man signaled to a senior auction manager standing behind him. The manager, a silver-haired woman in a sharp gray suit, came over immediately. "Ms. Mata," the manager said, offering her hand. "Welcome to Silverhaven. I am Sarah Jenkins, the lead auctioneer for today. We received the dossier from North Shore Trust this morning." "Is everything in order?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "More than in order," Sarah said, smiling. She reached into a locked metal box under the table and pulled out a packet. It wasn't the standard white envelope other bidders were holding. It was a thick cream-colored folder with a gold seal. "Based on the proof of funds and the irrevocable letter of credit from your bank, you have been cleared for the unconditional tier," Sarah explained, her voice carrying clearly in the stone entryway. "There is no cap on your paddle today." She handed me the paddle. It was number 007, a solid, heavy piece of plastic with a gold rim, distinct from the blue standard paddles. I took it. It felt cool in my hand. From the corner of my eye, I saw Brielle. Her jaw had actually dropped. She was staring at the gold-rimmed paddle, then at the manager, then at me. Her face was a mask of confusion. In her world, I was Quinn the waitress, Quinn the dropout, Quinn the failure. The cognitive dissonance was practically short-circuiting her brain. She looked like she wanted to say something, to shout that there must be a mistake, but the authority of the auction manager held her back. "Thank you," I told Sarah. "I appreciate the discretion." "Of course, if you need a private room to confer with your advisors during the bidding, we have the library set aside," Sarah offered. "That won't be necessary," I said. "I prefer to stand." I turned away from the desk, slipping the folder under my arm. Brielle was still frozen by the pillar. I caught her eye for 1 second. I didn't smirk. I didn't wave. I just looked through her, as if she were part of the architecture, and walked past. I found a quiet spot in the inner courtyard, away from the noise of the arriving crowd. The courtyard was overgrown, with ivy strangling the stone benches, but the bones of the place were beautiful. I took a deep breath of the cold air. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. It was a message from Miles Carter. Funds are fully locked. The liquidity transfer is complete. You have the green light to go all the way. Do not let them breathe. I stared at the screen. 300 miles away, in a glass office in the city, Miles was moving numbers around that would make Aunt Loretta's head spin. I looked back toward the entrance. Through the archway, I could see the Lane family regrouping. Loretta was pointing at the chandeliers in the main hall, likely already planning where she would hang her portrait. They were laughing again, their confidence restored by their own echo chamber. They believed this was their day. They believed destiny owed them this mansion because they had wanted it for so long. They had come here to win a trophy. They had come to paste a veneer of nobility over a lifetime of mediocrity. I slipped my phone back into my pocket and gripped the handle of my paddle. The gold rim caught a ray of sun slicing through the ivy. I was not here for the real estate. I was not here for the status. I was here to close a chapter that had been written in invisible ink for 15 years. I was here to buy the one thing they could not afford, the truth. Let the bidding begin. The silence of the courtyard at Silverhaven was heavy, but it was nothing compared to the silence of the dining room in Mapleford when I was 17 years old. Standing there in the shadow of the stone columns, I could almost smell the furniture polish and pot roast that permeated my aunt's house, a scent that for years I associated with the feeling of suffocation. My mother died when I was 12, and my father had left long before that, chasing a dream or a bottle. I never knew which, so I was shipped to Mapleford to live with Aunt Loretta and her family. From the moment I crossed the threshold with my duffel bag, the dynamic was set in stone. I was not a daughter. I was a tenant who could not pay rent. There was no physical abuse. Loretta never raised a hand to me. That would have been too messy, too obvious for the neighbors to see. Her weapon of choice was much more sophisticated. It was a ledger she kept in her head, a running tally of everything I cost them, every plate of food, every drop of hot water, every notebook for school was noted and commented upon. "This is not a hotel. Quinn," she would say if I left a light on for 5 minutes too long, "we are making sacrifices to keep you here." I learned to shrink. I learned to walk softly on the floorboards, so I would not remind them of my existence. I learned that the greatest sin I could commit was to be a burden. The breaking point did not come with a shout, but with a bank statement. My mother had left a small education fund. It was not a fortune, just enough to get me started at a state university, maybe cover tuition for 2 years if I worked part-time. I had clung to that account number like a lifeline. It was my exit strategy. It was the only thing that belonged to me in a house where even the bed sheets felt like they were on loan. When I was 18, just weeks away from graduation, I went to the local bank branch to check the balance. I wanted to see the number, to feel the safety of it. The teller, a woman named Mrs. Higgins, who had known my mother, looked at her screen and frowned. She told me the balance was $42. I remember the cold feeling that washed over me, starting at my fingertips and moving to my chest. I thought it was a mistake. Mrs. Higgins turned the screen. There had been a withdrawal 3 months prior. A transfer, authorized by the custodian of the account, Loretta Lane. I walked home in a daze. When I confronted Loretta in the kitchen, she did not deny it. She did not even look up from chopping vegetables. "Owen was in trouble. Quinn," she said, her voice matter-of-fact. "His dealership idea needed a bridge loan. He was going to lose everything. Family helps family first. You are young. You can work. Owen has a reputation to maintain." "That was for my college," I said, my voice shaking. "Mom left that for me." Loretta set the knife down and turned to me, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Her expression was not apologetic. It was disappointed. "Do not be selfish," After everything we have done for you, after the roof over your head and the food in your stomach, you would begrudge your cousin a chance to succeed because you want to go sit in a classroom? You can go to community college later. Owen needed it now. I tried to argue. I tried to scream that it was theft. That was when the punishment began. It was not a grounding or a lecture. It was the freeze. For 3 weeks, no one in the house spoke to me. Brielle, Kayla, Owen, and Loretta. They looked through me as if I were made of glass. At the dinner table, they passed dishes around me. If I entered a room, conversation stopped. It was a calculated, crushing isolation designed to make me feel like the villain. They made me feel that by asking for my own money, I was the ungrateful intruder attacking their unity. I spent those weeks as a ghost. I stopped eating at the table. I ate scraps in the kitchen after they were done. During family gatherings, while my cousins sat in the living room laughing and discussing their road trips or the new cars their parents had helped them finance, I was in the back, scrubbing roasting pans. I can still feel the grease on my hands. I can hear Owen's voice booming from the other room, bragging about a business deal that I knew my college fund had paid for. He was the golden boy, the entrepreneur. I was the help. One Sunday afternoon, about a month after the money was gone, I was wiping down the counters. The kitchen window was open. Loretta was on the back porch with her friend, a woman named Mrs. Gable. They were drinking iced tea. "It is a shame about Quinn not going to state," Mrs. Gable said. "Is she staying here?" I froze, the rag in my hand. "Oh, she will be here," Loretta said. I could hear the smirk in her voice. "She has nowhere else to go. The poor thing just does not have the drive. She is not like my Brielle or Owen. Quinn is, well, she is destined to need help. She will never get far. Eventually, she will realize her place is here, making herself useful." Her place is here. That sentence burned itself into my brain hotter than a branding iron. It was not just that they stole from me, it was that they had decided my future for me. They had written a script where I was the permanent failure, the eternal charity case who washed the dishes while they lived the life. I did not cry. I finished wiping the counter. I folded the rag and hung it over the faucet. That night, I packed. I did not have much, 2 small suitcases. I took the few clothes that were actually mine, my mother's photo, and the $42 I had withdrawn from the account. I waited until 3 in the morning, when the house was silent. I did not leave a note. A note would have been an opening for a conversation, and I was done talking. I walked 2 miles to the bus station in the dark. I bought a one-way ticket to Briarfield. It was a city 2 hours away, big enough to get lost in, small enough to afford. The first year in Briarfield was a blur of exhaustion. Loretta was right about one thing. The real world did not care about my dreams, but she was wrong about my drive. I rented a room in a basement that smelled of mildew and damp earth. I slept on a mattress on the floor for 6 months. I did not have a car, so I walked or took the bus everywhere. I worked 3 jobs, from 6 in the morning until 2 in the afternoon. I was a barista, serving coffee to people in suits who never looked me in the eye. From 3 until 7, I worked the phones at a call center, getting yelled at by strangers about their cable bills, and on weekends, I did data entry for a logistics company, typing numbers into spreadsheets until my eyes blurred. It was the data entry job that changed everything. While other people saw boring columns of numbers, I started to see patterns. I saw how shipping routes correlated with fuel prices. I saw how delays in one sector rippled into costs in another. I realized I had a mind for this. I understood the language of value and risk. I enrolled in community college, taking night classes in finance and economics. I was tired all the time. My bones ached. I ate instant noodles and day-old pastries from the coffee shop, but every time I wanted to quit, every time I wanted to close my eyes and just sleep for 2 days, I heard Loretta's voice. She will never get far. It became my mantra. It became the battery that powered me through the double shifts. I remember one specific night on the bus. It was raining. A cold, miserable rain that streaked the windows. I was coming back from a late shift, my feet throbbing, my bank account hovering just above zero. We passed a large, warm-looking house with golden lights spilling out of the windows. It looked a little like the Lane house in Mapleford. I pressed my forehead against the cold glass. I looked at my reflection, pale and exhausted, but my eyes were hard. "I am going to buy and sell them," I whispered to the empty seat next to me. It was not a threat of violence. It was a promise of scale. I vowed that one day, the amount of money they stole from me, that $20,000 that seemed like a mountain back then, would be a rounding error in my daily ledger. I vowed that I would build a life so large, so undeniable, that their opinion of me would be rendered statistically insignificant. I sat on that bus and visualized a future where I did not have to shrink. I visualized a future where I held the deed, the title, and the power. Back in the courtyard of Silverhaven, the wind picked up, rustling the dead leaves at my feet. The memory faded, but the steel it had forged in my spine remained. I was not the girl washing dishes anymore. I was not the tenant. I checked my watch. The auction was about to start in 10 minutes. I smoothed the lapel of my jacket. I thought about the text from Miles. I thought about the paddle in my hand. Loretta had told her friend I would always come back to ask for help. She was half right. I had come back. But I was not here to ask for anything. I was here to take. It took 4 years of grinding through community college and night shifts before I landed my first real seat at the table. It was not a mahogany boardroom table. It was a scratched laminate desk in the back corner of a firm called Horizon Metrics Group. Horizon was a boutique real estate analysis firm, small, hungry, and desperate for data. They hired me not because of a prestigious degree, but because during the interview, I pointed out a calculation error in their quarterly projection that the senior analyst had missed. I started the following Monday as a junior analyst, which was a fancy title for a data janitor. For the first year, my life was a blur of spreadsheets and county tax records. My job was the work nobody else wanted. I spent 10 hours a day cleaning up corrupted data sets, cross-referencing zoning codes, and reading the fine print of municipal urban planning documents that were drier than dust. While the senior brokers were out playing golf and shaking hands, I was submerged in the basement of the housing market, looking at the plumbing. But a strange thing happened in that silence. I began to love it. I realized that numbers, unlike people, do not lie. People exaggerate. Brokers use words like charming and up-and-coming to mask rot and crime rates. But the data, the debt-to-income ratios of a neighborhood, the frequency of lien filings, the shift in commercial permits, told the unvarnished truth. I started to see the matrix. I could look at a spreadsheet of 1,000 properties and spot the one that didn't fit, the anomaly that signaled either a disaster or a gold mine. The turning point came 18 months in. The firm was preparing to advise a major client on purchasing a luxury condominium development in the downtown district. Everyone was ecstatic. The glossy brochures showed rooftop pools and marble lobbies. The projected returns were 18%. It was the darling deal of the quarter. I was just supposed to format the final presentation, but as I was importing the demographic data, I noticed a discrepancy in the city's infrastructure reports. The sewage capacity for that block had not been upgraded since 1950, and there was a pending environmental lawsuit regarding the bedrock stability that had been buried in a subclause of a municipal bond hearing 3 years ago. I did not have the authority to kill the deal. I was just the girl who made the coffee and fixed the Excel macros. But I could not let it go. I stayed up all night, compiling a risk analysis report. It was 10 pages long, dense, and irrefutable. The next morning, I walked into the director's office. His name was Marcus, a man who valued speed over caution. I placed the folder on his desk. "What is this?" he asked, not looking up from his phone. "It is a funeral notice for the downtown project," I said. "If the client buys that land, they will be tied up in litigation for 5 years. The foundation permits will never clear." Marcus looked at me like I had spoken in tongues, but he read it. He read every word. Then he canceled the meeting with the client. 2 weeks later, the news broke. The developer of that project filed for bankruptcy protection. due to unforeseen geological complications. Horizon Metrics looked like geniuses for dodging a bullet that would have cost their client $40 million. That afternoon, Marcus called me into the conference room. He was not alone. Sitting at the end of the table was a man I had seen only in passing, Landon Pierce. Landon was a legend in a very quiet, very specific way. He was not on the covers of magazines. He was the money behind the money. He was an investor who specialized in distressed assets, a man who moved with the stealth of a submarine. He was in his late 50s, wearing a suit that cost more than my first year's salary, but he wore it carelessly. "Marcus tells me you are the one who found the bedrock issue," Landon said. His voice was low, gravelly. "It was in the public record," I replied. "You just had to look past the first page." Landon studied me. It was an intense, dissecting gaze. Most people stop reading when they see what they want to see. You read until you find the reason to say no. I like that. That meeting changed the trajectory of my life. Landon became my mentor. Though he never used that word, he called me his scout. Under his wing, I graduated from cleaning data to interpreting it. He gave me access to the real machinery of the market. I started seeing sensitive data on foreclosures before they hit the public listings. I learned how to read the desperation in a bank's balance sheet. I learned that the real estate market is 50% math and 50% psychology. Landon started taking me to auctions, not the high-end galas, but the gritty, sweat-stained foreclosure auctions on the courthouse steps or in dim hotel ballrooms. "Watch the hands, Quinn," he would whisper to me. "Do not watch the board. Watch the hands." I sat in the back row with a notebook, the invisible scribe. I watched men in expensive suits get caught up in bidding wars, driving the price up simply because they could not bear to lose to the guy across the aisle. I saw the winner's curse play out in real time. They would win the property, but lose the profit margin the moment the gavel fell. I learned that an auction is a theater of ego. If you can detach your ego, if you can treat the property as a lifeless asset with a strict numerical ceiling, you become the most dangerous person in the room. It was during these sessions that I spotted a gap in the market. Everyone was chasing the shiny objects, the turnkey apartments, the new builds. They were overpaying for convenience. But there was another category, the properties that looked ugly on paper, the commercial buildings with weird zoning issues, the warehouses with tax liens, the strip malls with high vacancy rates. These assets scared away the banks and the retail investors. I spent 3 months analyzing a specific sector, industrial conversions, old manufacturing spaces in the fringe districts that were technically zoned for light industry but were geographically drifting into residential popularity. I pitched it to Landon over lunch at a diner. "We stopped chasing the hot market," I told him. "We buy the problems. We buy the buildings that make other investors vomit. We fix the paper mess. We do the cosmetic surgery, and we sell the potential, not the history." Landon chewed his sandwich slowly. "That is high risk, Quinn. You are talking about buying ghosts." "I am talking about buying value at 30 cents on the dollar," I countered. "I have the data." He looked at the binder I had prepared. He flipped through the pages, looking at my projections. Finally, he closed it. "Okay," he said, "but we do it my way. We set up a separate entity. My name stays off the letterhead. You run the operations. If it burns, it is on you. If it works, we split the upside." That was the birth of Northbridge Equity Partners. We started small. Our office was a sublet space above a dry cleaner. My desk was a door laid across 2 filing cabinets. But we had capital, and we had a strategy. Our first target was a derelict textile warehouse on the edge of the River District. It had been on the market for 400 days. The roof leaked. The basement had a colony of rats that could have formed their own government. And the title was a nightmare of inheritance disputes. Everyone else saw a teardown. I saw 20-foot ceilings, exposed brick, and a location that was exactly 3 blocks from where the new subway extension was planned to open in 2 years. I spent 6 months living and breathing that building. I negotiated with 3 different heirs to clear the title. I fought with the city council to get a variance for mixed-use office space. I wore a hard hat more often than I wore heels. I managed the contractors, firing 2 crews until I found one that could pour concrete straight. We turned that rat nest into the Ironworks, a boutique creative workspace for tech startups. We kept the grit, the exposed pipes, the heavy beams, but added fiber optic internet and a coffee bar in the lobby. We put it on the market 18 months after we bought it. We sold it for 3 times our total investment. I remember the day the wire transfer hit the Northbridge account. I sat in my cheap office chair, staring at the screen. The number was long. It contained more commas than I had ever seen in my personal banking history. My share of the commission was enough to wipe out my student loans in a single keystroke. I remember clicking Submit Payment on the loan servicer's website. I watched the balance go from $45,000 to zero. I sat there for a long time, listening to the hum of the air conditioner. I thought about the $42 in my account when I left Mapleford. I thought about the nights I slept on a mattress on the floor. I called Landon. "It is done," I said. "The funds are clear." "Good," Landon replied, his voice devoid of emotion. "Do not buy a celebratory car. Put it into the next deal. We are just getting started." He was right. The money was nice, but the feeling was better. I had proven that my mind was an asset. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I wasn't the victim of a family that stole my future. I was building a new one, brick by brick, deal by deal. I went home that night, and for the first time in years, I did not dream about the house in Mapleford. I dreamed about skylines. I dreamed about maps. I dreamed about the next hunt. Northbridge equity was no longer an experiment. It was a weapon, and I was finally learning how to aim it. Over the next 5 years, Northbridge Equity Partners ceased to be an experiment and became a fortress. We were no longer operating out of a sublet above a dry cleaner. We occupied the entire top floor of a renovated warehouse in the financial district. Ironically, one of the first buildings we had saved from demolition. I remained the ghost in the machine, while Landon Pierce was the public face, shaking hands at charity galas and giving quotes to the business journals. I was the one pulling the levers in the dark. I liked it that way. Invisibility was a shield. If they did not know who you were, they could not prepare for you. I built my team with a very specific philosophy. I did not hire the polished graduates from Ivy League schools who had never known what it meant to worry about rent. I hired the fighters. I hired Maya, a brilliant forensic accountant who had been fired from a top firm because she refused to sign off on a shady audit. I hired David, a property scout who had a criminal record for a minor offense 10 years ago and could not get an interview anywhere else despite knowing every zoning code in the state by heart. I looked at them and I saw versions of myself. I saw the hunger that only comes from being told you are not good enough. We were a calm, lethal unit. We moved faster than the big banks and dug deeper than the hedge funds. We were making serious money, the kind of capital that allows you to stop looking at price tags in grocery stores. But for me, the office was not just a workplace. It was the home I never had in Mapleford. Speaking of Mapleford, the Lane family was making noise again. I kept a digital eye on them. It was a bad habit, like pressing on a bruise to see if it still hurt. Social media algorithms, helpful as always, fed me updates. It seemed the real estate market in their town had ticked upward, and Owen had managed to flip 2 residential properties without bankrupting himself. That small taste of success had gone straight to their heads. I saw posts from Brielle showing off designer handbags that I knew were likely bought on credit. I saw Owen posing next to a leased sports car with captions like, "The Lane Empire returns," and "Destiny awaits." They were preening, puffing their chests out, convinced that they were finally stepping into the aristocracy they felt entitled to. Then came the Tuesday night that changed the game. It was late, nearly 9 in the evening. The office was empty except for the hum of the server room and the city lights bleeding through the glass walls. I was reviewing a packet of distressed assets sent over by a bank we frequently partnered with. It was a standard portfolio: a few strip malls, a failed hotel project, and some high-end residential foreclosures. I almost scrolled past the third file. The header read, Silverhaven Estate, Ravenwood County, Asset Liquidation, Pre-Auction Notice. My hand froze on the mouse. Silverhaven. The name echoed in my head with the voice of Aunt Loretta. I closed my eyes and I could hear her. 10 years ago, standing in the kitchen, one day, Quinn, we will live in a place like Silverhaven. That is where people of quality belong, not in this starter home. I opened the file. The photos confirmed it. The limestone facade, the 6 columns, the sprawling lawn. The owner, a tech CEO, had over-leveraged himself and fled the country, leaving the bank to clean up the mess. They wanted a quick sale. They were looking for a buyer with liquidity and a vision, someone who could take the asset quietly before it went to a public circus. I read through the preliminary data. It was a solid investment, underpriced, structurally sound, historically significant, but as I scrolled down to the financial addendums, specifically the section detailing the existing liens and bondholders attached to the property's original financing structure, I stopped breathing. There, in a list of secondary bondholders for the original development trust that built the estate in the 1990s, was a name I knew better than my own. Elaine Mata. My mother. I stared at the screen until the pixels started to blur. It made no sense. My mother was a school teacher. She didn't have the capital to be a bondholder in a luxury estate trust. She had died with a modest savings account and a life insurance policy. I printed the document, grabbed my coat, and walked out of the office. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning at 8 o'clock, I was sitting in the reception area of a law firm in the oldest part of the city. It was not a high-rise firm. It was a dusty, wood-paneled office that smelled of old paper and tobacco. Mr. Henderson was the junior partner who had handled my mother's small estate years ago. Now, he was a senior partner, his hair completely white. He looked surprised to see me. "Quinn," he said, ushering me into his office. "It has been a long time. You look successful." "I need to ask you about something," I said, sliding the printout across his desk. "My mother's name is on a bond registry for the Silverhaven Trust. How is that possible?" Mr. Henderson put on his reading glasses. He looked at the document, then he sighed and leaned back in his chair. A sad smile touched his lips. "Your mother was a very quiet woman, Quinn, but she was incredibly sharp," he said. "She knew her family better than they knew themselves. She knew the Lanes were reckless with money." He stood up and went to a filing cabinet, unlocking a drawer with a key from his vest pocket. He pulled out a yellowed file. "About 5 years before she passed, your mother received a small inheritance from a distant great-uncle. She didn't tell Loretta. She didn't tell anyone. She came to me. She wanted to invest it in something that would grow for you, but she wanted it locked away where her siblings couldn't touch it." He opened the file. "She bought into a high-yield real estate bond bucket. It was a passive investment. One of the underlying assets in that bucket happened to be the debt structure of Silverhaven Manor. She thought it was ironic. Actually, she told me, if my sister loves that house so much, maybe I should own a brick of it." "But I never saw this money," I said. "When she died, there was just the college fund." "That is the complexity," Mr. Henderson said, tapping the paper. "These bonds were structured with a bad actor clause. It is a protective trust mechanism. Basically, the income from these bonds was supposed to funnel into the general family trust that Loretta controlled as executor until you turned 25. However," he paused, looking at me over his glasses. "The clause stated that if the executor, Loretta, misappropriated any funds designated for the beneficiary, you, from any source, the trust would consider it a breach of fiduciary duty. In the event of such a breach, the bonds would not just continue to pay interest, they would accelerate and vest directly to you, along with all accrued compound interest and penalties charged to the trust." My mind raced back to the kitchen in Mapleford. I thought about the $42. I thought about the college fund Loretta had drained to save Owen's car dealership. "The college fund," I whispered. "She stole my college fund." "Exactly," Mr. Henderson said. When you left town, I formally noted that withdrawal as a breach. I sent notice to the Lane family, but I doubt they read the legal jargon. They probably threw the letter away. But legally, that theft triggered the clause. The bonds were pulled out of the general trust and placed into a holding account for you, accumulating value for the last 12 years. He turned a page and pointed to a figure at the bottom. Because the Silverhaven estate is now being liquidated, these bonds are being called in. You are not just a potential buyer, Quinn. You are a secured creditor. You hold a significant piece of the debt on that house, and because the interest has been compounding since the day Loretta took your tuition money, the sum is substantial. I looked at the number. It was not a fortune that would buy the world, but it was enough. It was enough to be the heavy anchor in a bid. It was enough to give me leverage that no one else in that auction room would have. They did this, I said, my voice trembling slightly. By stealing from me, they saved this money for me. Your mother wanted to ensure that if they ever hurt you, they would pay for your future without knowing it, Mr. Henderson said softly. She was playing a very long game. Quinn. I walked out of that office into the bright sunlight of the city, but I felt like I was floating. I hailed a taxi back to Northbridge. I sat in the back seat, watching the buildings blur by. I thought about the irony. It was perfect. It was mathematical poetry. Loretta's greed, her absolute need to take everything I had, was the exact mechanic that had preserved my capital. If she had been a good aunt, if she had let me go to college, this money would have been diluted or spent. But because she was a thief, she had unknowingly created a war chest for her own destruction. I returned to my office and closed the door. I told my assistant to hold all calls. I sat in my chair and swiveled to face the window. I could see the skyline, sharp and jagged against the blue sky. I pulled up the photo of my mother that I kept on my phone. She looked tired in the picture, her eyes sad but kind. You knew, I whispered to the screen. You knew they would eat me alive if you left the money on the table, so you buried it. I looked back at the Silverhaven file on my desk. This was no longer just a business transaction. It wasn't just about ROI or cap rates. The Lanes were going to show up at that auction. I knew it. They would scrape together every dime, leverage every asset, and borrow from every shark in town to bid on that house. They would do it for vanity. They would do it to prove they were the royalty of Ravenwood. I picked up my phone and dialed Landon. I have found the next acquisition, I said when he answered. Is the data good? He asked. The data is personal, I replied. I need you to authorize a full liquidity draw. I am going to buy Silverhaven Manor, and I am going to do it in person. Quinn, Landon warned. We don't do emotion. Emotion kills the margin. This isn't emotion, Landon, I said, my voice steady as a flatline. This is a collection. I have a bad debt to clear, and I am going to foreclose on a lifetime of insults. There was a pause on the line. Then Landon chuckled. A dry sound. All right, set the limit. Just make sure you win. I have already won, I said. They just don't know it yet. I hung up the phone and looked out at the city. I was alone in my glass tower. I had no family to call, no one to share this victory with over dinner. The silence was absolute, but for the first time in my life, the silence didn't feel like loneliness. It felt like power. I was going to buy Silverhaven, not to live in it, not to become like them. I was going to buy it to break the wheel. I was going to buy it because my mother had given me the hammer, and it was finally time to swing it. The easiest way to win a war is to strike before the enemy even knows the battle has begun. I could have approached the bank privately. I could have leveraged my relationship with Landon Pierce to make a pre-auction offer on Silverhaven Manor that would have been accepted before the listing ever went public. I had the capital. I had the connections. I could have quietly acquired the deed and simply sent Aunt Loretta a notification after the fact. But that would have been a mercy, and I was not in the market for mercy. I needed them to be there. I needed them to stand in that hall, paddle in hand, believing with every fiber of their being that they were moments away from victory. The crash is only fatal if you fall from a great height, and for the last few weeks, the Lane family had been climbing a ladder built of delusion. My first move was to weaponize the past. I sat down with my legal team and formally activated the bad actor clause in the bond trust Mr. Henderson had revealed to me. We did not sue Loretta. We simply presented the evidence of the misappropriated college fund to the trustee. The reaction was immediate. The trust dissolved the bonds held in the general family pool and reassigned the full value, plus 12 years of compounded interest, to me. It was a significant sum. I took that paperwork straight to North Shore Trust. I want to use this bond portfolio as the primary collateral for the Silver Haven bid, I told the senior lending officer, a woman named Beverly who had seen me close 3 impossible deals in the last 2 years. It is liquid and it is solid, Beverly noted, tapping her pen on the desk. But Silver Haven is a white elephant. Quinn, it costs $20,000 a month just to keep the lights on and the lawn mowed. Why do you want it? You flip industrial warehouses. You do not buy vanity estates. This was the second part of the plan. The Lanes wanted the house to stroke their egos. I needed to show the bank I wanted it for a purpose that generated value. I am not living there, I said, sliding a bound presentation across the desk. I am rezoning it. I want to turn Silver Haven into an academy, a mentorship hub and incubator for women in finance and real estate, dormitories in the East Wing, lecture halls in the ballroom, startup offices in the carriage house. It will be the first of its kind on the East Coast. Beverly opened the binder. She looked at the projections, the architectural renderings, and the mission statement. Her eyes lit up. Banks love money, but they love good PR even more. Funding a luxury home for a rich family is boring. Funding a landmark educational center for female entrepreneurs? That puts the bank on the front page of the business section for all the right reasons. This is brilliant, she said softly. The board will approve the line of credit by Friday. You will walk into that auction with a nuclear weapon. While I was securing the ammunition, I had my team at Northbridge look into the defensive lines of the enemy. I needed to know exactly how strong the Lanes were. What we found was not strength. It was a house of cards held together by sweat and prayer. My analyst, Maya, walked into my office 3 days before the auction with a stack of files. You were right to be suspicious of Owen's sudden success, she said. He is drowning. He has 3 flips currently on the market that are not moving. To float the loans on those, he went to a secondary lender, a hard money fund called Red Rock Capital. Red Rock was known for 2 things: exorbitant interest rates and ruthless collections. He borrowed $200,000 against the equity in his own home to put down the deposit for the Silver Haven auction. Maya explained, if they do not win the bid, or if they win and cannot service the debt, he is going to lose his personal residence. I stared at the numbers. They were going all in. Loretta had liquidated her retirement accounts. Brielle and Kayla had maxed out credit lines. They had pooled every cent they could scrape together, convinced that buying Silver Haven would skyrocket their reputation and allow them to refinance everything later. It was the gambler's fallacy. They were betting the farm to win the casino. Buy the debt, I said. Maya blinked. Excuse me? Contact Red Rock Capital. Offer to buy Owen's note at face value. I want to be the one holding the paper on his house. Quinn, Maya said, her voice cautious. If you do that, you can foreclose on him next week. You could put your cousin on the street. I know, I replied, looking out the window. But if Red Rock keeps it, they will put him on the street. If I hold it, I control the timeline. I am not doing this to destroy him. Maya, I am doing it to put a leash on him. It was a fine line I was walking. In the quiet of my apartment late at night, I wrestled with it. There is a seduction to revenge. It whispers that you should burn everything down, that you should inflict the same shame on them that they inflicted on you. I remembered the feeling of being 19, hungry and scared in a city that didn't care if I lived or died. I remembered the way they laughed while I scrubbed their floors. But I was not them. If I let them win Silver Haven, they would eventually default and lose everything to the bank. They would be destitute. If I destroyed them completely, I became the monster they always said I was. I drew a hard boundary. I would stop them from getting the mansion. I would let them lose the bid fees. I would let them feel the crushing weight of their own hubris. But I would not foreclose on Owen's house unless he forced my hand. I would not bankrupt Loretta. I would leave them bruised, stuck in their mediocrity, forced to live within their means for the first time in their lives. That was not cruelty. That was a correction. The day before the auction, Miles Carter came to my office. He looked impeccable as always, carrying a secure briefcase. "The paddle registration is confirmed," he said, sitting down. "The bank has issued the proof of funds letter. We are capped at $8 million, which is $3 million more than the property is worth on its best day. Unless a Saudi prince shows up, you are bulletproof." "And the lanes?" I asked. "Our sources at the auction house say they registered yesterday. They barely met the liquidity requirement. They are stretched thin. Quinn, if the bidding goes past $4 million, they are going to start bleeding." "Good," I said. "Let them bleed a little." Miles hesitated. "You know, once you do this, there is no going back to Thanksgiving dinners. This bridges the gap forever." "The gap was already there, Miles," I said. "I am just turning on the lights so they can finally see it." That night, the city was quiet. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling window of my apartment on the 35th floor. The traffic below looked like a river of red and white lights. I held a glass of water in my hand, staring at my reflection in the glass. I looked different than the girl who left Mapleford. My posture was straighter. My clothes were sharper, but the eyes were the same. I thought about my mother. I thought about how she must have felt, signing those bond papers in secret, knowing her sister was a thief but unable to say it out loud to keep the peace. She had swallowed so much pride to protect me. She had played the role of the quiet, passive sister while secretly building a safety net she hoped I would never need. I pressed my hand against the cold glass. "You were too nice to them," I whispered to the empty room. "You let them walk all over you because you thought family meant sacrifice. But tomorrow, Mom, I am rewriting the definition." I turned away from the window and looked at the outfit I had laid out for the morning. Navy blazer, white silk blouse, armor. "I am not going there to prove to them that I am rich," I said, my voice gaining strength in the silence. "I am going there to prove to myself that your sacrifice was not a waste. I am going to buy the symbol of their vanity and turn it into a fortress for women who have no one else to bet on them." I went to bed, but I did not sleep much. I lay in the dark, listening to the hum of the city, visualizing the moment the gavel would fall. I played it over and over in my mind like a film reel. The look on Loretta's face, the silence in the room, the sound of the auctioneer saying my name. It was not about hate anymore. It was about balance. The scales had been tipped against me since I was 12 years old. Tomorrow, for the first time in history, gravity was going to work in my favor. The grand ballroom of the Ravenwood Historical Society was designed to make people feel small. The ceiling soared 30 feet high, draped in velvet curtains the color of dried blood, and the crystal chandeliers cast a light that was both flattering to diamonds and unforgiving to sweat. The air was thick with a specific kind of tension, a cocktail of old money, new ambition, and the metallic taste of adrenaline. I took a seat in the middle of the 5th row. It was a strategic choice. I was far enough back to observe the entire room, but close enough that anyone standing at the front, specifically, anyone claiming a victory, would have to look right past me. I placed my paddle, number 007, face down on my lap. I opened my notebook and uncapped a pen. I looked like a secretary taking minutes, or perhaps a student auditing a class. I did not look like a threat. At 10 o'clock sharp, the double doors swung open, and the Lane family made their entrance. It was a performance. Aunt Loretta led the phalanx, wearing a cream-colored suit that screamed matriarch. She was beaming, nodding to people she barely knew, waving to a local councilman who looked confused by the attention. Brielle and Kayla flanked her like bridesmaids at a wedding, and Owen brought up the rear, adjusting his tie every 4 seconds. They were loud. They wanted to be seen. They wanted the room to know that the rightful owners of Silverhaven had arrived to collect their keys. Just a formality, really, I heard Owen say to a man standing near the aisle. We have been preparing for this acquisition for years. It is about bringing the legacy home. I kept my head down, sketching a jagged line on the paper. Legacy. The only legacy they had was a trail of bad credit and broken promises. Loretta spotted me as they moved toward the front row, the seats reserved for serious players. She paused, her smile faltering for a fraction of a second before it hardened back into place. She leaned over to Brielle, whispered something, and they both giggled. It was a high, brittle sound that grated against the low murmur of the room. They took their seats. Loretta placed her paddle on her knee like a scepter. Sarah Jenkins took the podium. She tapped the microphone, and the room fell silent. The heavy oak doors were closed. The air conditioning hummed. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome," Sarah said, her voice professional and crisp. "Today we are offering the property known as Silver Haven Manor, 40 acres, 12 bedrooms, a piece of Ravenwood history." She went through the legal disclaimers, the terms of the sale, the deposit requirements. I saw the regional manager of North Shore Trust standing in the wings. He caught my eye. He gave a barely perceptible nod. He knew exactly how deep my war chest was. He knew that the woman sitting quietly in row 5 was the only person in the room with a pre-cleared check that could swallow the building whole. "We will open the bidding at $1,500,000, Sarah announced. The room exploded into motion. 1-5, I have 1-5 in the front, the spotter yelled. 1-6, 1-6 to the gentleman in the blue. 1-7, 1-8. The numbers flew through the air like arrows. At this stage, it was just noise. The low-level investors, the flippers, and the dreamers were all throwing their hats in the ring, hoping to get lucky. I sat perfectly still. I did not move a muscle. I watched the lanes. Loretta was in her element every time a number was called. Her paddle shot up. She was bidding with a frantic energy, cutting people off, establishing dominance. She wanted to scare them away. $2 million, Loretta shouted, not waiting for the spotter. I have $2 million from the lady in the front, Sarah said calmly. Do I hear 2.1? 2.1, a developer from the city called out. 2.2, Owen yelled, leaning over his mother's shoulder. I checked my phone. A text from Miles popped up. They are burning fuel fast. Owen's face is getting red. Wait for the plateau. I looked up. Brielle had turned around in her seat to scan the crowd. Her eyes landed on me. She smirked, leaned back, and whispered loudly enough for the row behind her to hear. Look at her. She is just taking notes, probably hoping they hand out free sandwiches at the break. Buying houses is for the adults. Quinn. The man next to me shifted uncomfortably. I did not look at Brielle. I did not blink. I wrote the number 2,500,000 in my notebook and circled it. The price climbed. 2,500,000, 2,800,000, 3 million. At $3 million, the room changed. The casual bidders lowered their paddles. The air got thinner. The fun was over. Now it was serious money. 3 million is the bid, Sarah chanted. Looking for 3.1? 3.1? A silence stretched. A heavy-set man in the third row raised his paddle. 3.1? Loretta stiffened. I saw her shoulders tense. She whispered furiously to Owen. He pulled out a calculator, punched in some numbers, and nodded aggressively. 3.2, Loretta screamed, thrusting her paddle into the air. 3.2 to the Lane family, Sarah acknowledged. The heavy-set man shook his head and put his paddle down. He was out. 3.2, going once, Sarah said. My heart hammered against my ribs. A slow, heavy thud. This was it. This was the ceiling. They had stretched themselves to the absolute limit. I could see it in their body language. The way Loretta was gripping the armrest. The way Owen was wiping sweat from his forehead. They thought they had done it. They thought the silence in the room was the sound of respect. Going twice? Sarah said, raising the gavel. Loretta turned to the crowd, a look of triumph already spreading across her face. She was practically glowing. She was the queen of Ravenwood. She had won. $3,500,000, I said. My voice was not loud, but it cut through the silence like a razor blade. I raised paddle 007. I held it steady. The room gasped. It was a collective intake of breath that sucked the oxygen out of the hall. Loretta froze. Her head snapped around so fast I thought her neck would snap. She stared at me. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Brielle looked like she had been slapped. Sarah Jenkins looked at me. A small, professional smile touched her lips. She knew. "I have a new bid," Sarah announced, her voice energized. $3,500,000 from Ms. Mata in the 5th row. The number hung in the air. It was a $300,000 jump. It was a power move. It was a statement that said, "I am not playing your game. I am ending it." Loretta turned back to Owen. She was shaking now. I could see them arguing. Owen was typing frantically on his phone, likely checking balances, checking limits, realizing the math did not work. They were tapped out. They had leveraged the house, the cars, the business, and they were at 3.2. "Do I hear 3.6? Sarah asked, looking directly at Loretta. 3.6 to stay in? Loretta stared at the auctioneer. Then she looked back at me. Her eyes were wide, filled with a mixture of confusion and horror. She saw the paddle. She saw the gold rim. She saw the calm, dead-eyed expression on my face. She realized, in that second, that she didn't know who I was anymore. 3.6? Sarah asked again, going once. Loretta's hand twitched. She wanted to raise it. She wanted to scream, but Owen grabbed her wrist. He shook his head. His face was pale gray. They couldn't do it. They were done. "Going twice," Sarah said. The gavel was raised high. I did not look at the podium. I looked straight at Loretta. I held her gaze. I wanted her to see me when it happened. I wanted her to remember the face of the girl she called a charity case. "Sold," Sarah said. Bang. The sound of the gavel hitting the wood was the loudest thing I had ever heard. It sounded like a gunshot. It sounded like a door slamming shut. It sounded like freedom. "Sold for $3,500,000 to Ms. Quinn Mata," Sarah announced. For 3 seconds, there was absolute silence. Then, the room erupted. Reporters who had been lurking in the back surged forward. Heads turned. Whispers turned into a roar. "Who is she? Is that the niece? Where did she get the money?" I stood up slowly. I capped my pen. I picked up my bag. I looked at the front row. The Lane family was still sitting there. They looked like statues made of ash. Loretta had slumped back in her chair, her expensive suit suddenly looking like a costume. Brielle was staring at me with her mouth open, tears of rage welling in her eyes. Owen was staring at the floor, looking like a man who knew his eviction notice was in the mail. They had come to be crowned. Instead, they had just watched their entire world get purchased by the spectator in row 5. The heavy oak doors of the ballroom swung shut behind me, muting the roar of the crowd. But the silence in the corridor was short-lived. I had barely taken 5 steps toward the exit when the Lane family intercepted me. They did not approach like relatives greeting a winner. They swarmed like creditors chasing a defaulter. Owen reached me first. His face was a map of panic, splotchy and sweating. He physically blocked my path, his chest heaving. "What the hell do you think you are doing?" he hissed, his voice cracking. "Do you have any idea what you just did in there? That was our deal. We had investors lined up. We had a plan." I stopped and adjusted my handbag on my shoulder. I looked at him calmly. "I bought a house, Owen. It was a public auction. The highest bidder wins. That is usually how these things work." "Don't play dumb with me!" Brielle shrieked, stepping up beside him. Her composure had completely disintegrated. "You did this on purpose. You sat there like a mute for an hour just to humiliate us at the last second. You don't want that house. You can't even afford the property taxes on a place like Silverhaven. This is some kind of sick joke." "It is not a joke," I said, my voice steady and low. "And it is certainly not a game." "You cheated," Brielle spat out, her finger pointing accusingly at my chest. "I know you did. You must have slept with someone at the bank or pulled some scam to get that paddle. There is no way that you have $3.5 million. You are a waitress. Quinn, you are a dropout. The hallway was filling with people leaving the auction, and heads were turning. The lanes didn't care. They were too wrapped up in their own disaster to notice they were making a scene. I sighed. A long, tired exhale. I reached into my bag and pulled out the thick, cream-colored folder I had received at registration. I did not throw it at them. I did not shove it in their faces. I simply held it out, offering it to Brielle like a menu. "Read it," I said. Brielle hesitated, then snatched the folder. She ripped it open. Loretta and Owen crowded around her. I watched their eyes scan the documents. I saw them read the letterhead from North Shore Trust. I saw them read the line verifying the deposit. I saw them read the confirmation of liquid assets that exceeded the purchase price by a safe margin. This is fake," Loretta stammered, looking up at me. Her eyes were wild. "Northbridge Equity Partners? Who are they? Who is backing you?" "I am," I said. Loretta blinked. "What?" "Northbridge Equity Partners is my firm," I said, keeping my tone conversational. "I co-founded it 5 years ago. We specialize in distressed commercial assets and industrial revitalization. I am the operating partner. The money is mine. Aunt Loretta, every cent of it." "That is impossible," Loretta whispered. The fight was draining out of her, replaced by a cold, dawning horror. You lived on my sofa. You wore Brielle's hand-me-downs. You are the girl who couldn't even pay for community college." The mention of college hung in the air between us. It was the elephant in the room that had been stomping on me for 15 years. "I am glad you brought that up," I said. I reached into the folder again, extracting a thinner, older-looking set of papers. These were not crisp bank documents. They were photocopies of bank statements from 12 years ago, stapled to a transfer receipt. I handed them to Loretta. "Do you recognize this?" I asked. Loretta looked down. Her face went ashen. It was the transaction record of her withdrawing $20,000 from the education trust my mother had left me. The memo line on the transfer read, "Loan to O, Lane Dealership, Emergency Bridge." Owen looked over her shoulder and saw his name. He flinched as if he had been burned. "I never asked for it back," I said softly. I packed my bags, and I walked to the bus station with $42 in my pocket because you told me that family helps family. You told me I owed you. "Quinn, listen," Owen started, his voice taking on a desperate, pleading tone. "That was a long time ago. Business was tight. We meant to pay it back. But I am not asking for a refund. Owen," I cut him off. "I am telling you that the debt is settled." I pointed to the bond certificate attached to the back of the packet Loretta was holding. "My mother knew," I said. "She knew you would take it, so she set up a failsafe. When you stole that tuition money, you triggered a clause in a separate bond trust she had hidden away. By taking the small amount, you accidentally gave me the large amount, the capital I used to buy Silverhaven today. A significant portion of it came from the compound interest on your greed." Loretta looked like she might faint. She leaned against the marble wall, clutching the papers. Her narrative, the story she had told herself and her friends for years about how she had saved her poor, helpless niece, was crumbling in real time. You knew this whole time?" she whispered. "I found out recently," I said, "but I have known who you are for a long time." Brielle was crying now, silent, angry tears. "So that is it? You bought the house just to spite us? You are going to move into Silverhaven just to rub it in our faces?" I shook my head. I looked at each of them. Brielle, the bully who was terrified of being ordinary. Owen, the businessman who built his life on other people's money. Loretta, the matriarch who needed a mansion to feel like a mother. "I am not moving in," I said. "I do not want to live in Silverhaven. To me, it is just a building with good bones and a bad history." "Then why?" Loretta asked, her voice trembling. "Why do this to us? We are family." "Because you needed to be stopped," I said. "You were going to mortgage your souls for a zip code. You were going to lose everything trying to pretend you were something you are not. I didn't buy this house to take it away from you. I bought it because I am the only one who can afford to turn it into something real." I took a step closer to Loretta. I did not touch her. I just looked her in the eye. "I am not the girl on the sofa anymore. Aunt Loretta, I am not the poor relation you can use to make yourself feel tall. And I am not a victim. I checked the ledger. We are even. You kept my tuition. I bought your dream house. Let's call it a fair trade." For the first time in my life, they had nothing to say. No insults, no gaslighting, no dismissive laughter. They just stood there, small and defeated in their expensive clothes, holding the paperwork that proved they had created the very architect of their own disappointment. "Ms. Mata?" A polite voice broke the silence. We all turned. It was Sarah Jenkins, the auctioneer, accompanied by 2 legal assistants. She ignored the Lanes completely, her focus entirely on me. "Ms. Mata, if you are ready, we have the transfer documents prepared in the private lounge," she said with a deferential nod. "The bank representatives are waiting to congratulate you. It is a remarkable acquisition." I looked back at my family one last time. "Go home," I said gently. "It is over." I turned my back on them. I walked towards Sarah, my heels clicking rhythmically on the marble floor. I did not look back to see if they were watching. I didn't need to. I knew they were. I walked into the private lounge, and as the heavy door clicked shut behind me, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders that I hadn't realized I was carrying since I was 12 years old. The air in the room smelled of fresh coffee and ink. It smelled like the future. The room where they keep the real power is never loud. It does not smell of perfume or desperation like the auction floor. It smells of polished mahogany, laser-printed paper, and filtered air that is kept at a precise 68 degrees. I sat at a conference table that was long enough to land a small aircraft on. Opposite me sat Sarah Jenkins, the auctioneer, and 2 senior directors from North Shore Trust. To my right was my own legal counsel, a sharp woman named Elena, who I had flown in from the city that morning. The stack of documents in front of me was 3 inches thick. Buying a house like Silverhaven Manor was not like buying a carton of milk. It was like acquiring a small country. There were title transfers, environmental impact waivers, historical preservation riders, and insurance binders. "Sign here," Elena said, pointing a manicured finger at a yellow tab. "And initial here." My pen moved across the pages. It was a rhythmic, hypnotic motion. With every signature, I was cementing the reality that the Lane family refused to accept. The deed, the title, the land. It was all transferring from a distressed asset portfolio into the holdings of Northbridge Equity Partners. After 20 minutes of signing, the lead banker, a man named Mr. Sterling with wire-rimmed glasses, cleared his throat. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a separate, thinner file. "Ms. Mata," he said, his tone shifting from congratulatory to conspiratorial. "There is the matter of the secondary acquisition we discussed earlier this week, the debt purchase." I stopped writing. I capped my pen and looked at him. "Go on." "As per your instructions, Northbridge has successfully acquired the distressed debt portfolio from Red Rock Capital," Mr. Sterling explained. "This package includes several high-risk commercial loans in the Ravenwood area. Among them is a secured note for $200,000 against the primary residence and business assets of 1 Owen Lane." Elena looked at me, her eyebrow raised. She knew the name, of course, but she did not know the specific strategy I was deploying. "So, to be clear," I said, leaning back in the leather chair, "I am now the holder of that note. I am the bank." "Correct," Mr. Sterling said. "Technically, given Mr. Lane's current liquidity ratio and the missed payment flags in the file, you have the right to call the loan immediately. You could demand full repayment within 30 days. If he cannot pay, which the data suggests he cannot, you can initiate foreclosure proceedings on his home and seize his business inventory." The room went quiet. They were waiting for the order. In their world, business was binary. If you hold the debt and the debtor is weak, you crush them. You strip the assets and move on. It would have been the easiest thing in the world to say the word. It would have been the ultimate revenge. I could have made Owen feel the same homelessness I felt when I walked to that bus station. I looked at the file. I thought about Owen. I thought about how he had been raised, coddled, protected, told he was a genius while he burned through money that wasn't his. If I bankrupted him, he would just play the victim again. He would blame the economy, or the bank, or me. He would never learn. "No," I said. Mr. Sterling blinked. "No? You do not want to call the loan?" "I want to restructure it," I said, my voice firm. "I want you to draft a new repayment plan for Mr. Lane. Freeze the interest rate so it stops compounding. Extend the term to 10 years to lower the monthly payments to something he can actually afford based on his real income, not his imaginary projections." "That is very generous," Elena noted, scribbling on her pad. "There are conditions," I added, holding up a finger. "Strict covenants. As long as he holds this debt with me, he is barred from taking out any further speculative loans, no more flipping houses he cannot afford, no more leveraging the family home for sure things. He has to stick to his core business. If he tries to expand or borrow a single dollar from another institution without my approval, the deal is void, and I take everything." "Mr. Sterling looked confused. "You want to put him on an allowance?" "I want to put him on a leash," I corrected. "I do not want to push him into a hole. Mr. Sterling, I want to stop him from digging a deeper one. My family has a history of sacrificing their future to pay for their reputation. That stops today. Owen is going to learn how to run a boring, sustainable business, even if I have to force him to do it." I looked at Elena. "Draft the letter. Tell him the debt has been purchased by an anonymous holding company. Keep my name off it for now, and present him with the new terms. Tell him it is a take-it-or-leave-it offer to save his house. He will take it." "Understood," Elena said. She looked at me with a new kind of respect. She realized this wasn't just a financial transaction, it was a rehabilitation program. With the heavy lifting done, I turned my attention to the property itself. I pulled up the schematics on my tablet and projected them onto the screen at the end of the room. "Now," I said, changing the energy in the room, "let us talk about what we are going to do with Silverhaven. I assume you will be looking for a residential broker to flip it?" Mr. Sterling asked. "Absolutely not," I said. "I am taking it off the residential market entirely. I am applying for a conditional use permit for educational purposes." I swiped the screen, bringing up the rendering I had commissioned weeks ago. The image showed Silverhaven Manor, but the driveway was not filled with luxury cars. It was filled with young women walking with laptops. The ballroom was set up with rows of desks and whiteboards. The carriage house was a makerspace. "Silverhaven Academy," I announced, "a tuition-free incubator and mentorship program for women entering the fields of real estate, finance, and urban planning, specifically for those from non-traditional backgrounds, women who do not have the connections, the capital, or the family name to get a foot in the door." Mr. Sterling took off his glasses and cleaned them. "That is ambitious and expensive. The upkeep alone is $20,000 a month." "I have the capital," I said, "and Northbridge will sponsor the initial endowment. We will bring in industry leaders to teach. We will use the estate to house fellows for 6-month intensives. This building was built to exclude people. Mr. Sterling, it was built to say, 'You cannot come in here.' I am going to turn it into a place that says, 'You belong here.'" My phone buzzed on the table. It was a message from Landon Pierce. I had sent him the finalized plan 10 minutes ago. Message from Landon. "I just read the brief. Quinn, this is not just an investment. If you pull this off, it is a statement. You are planting a flag on the grave of the old boys club. Go for it." Miles Carter sent a follow-up text seconds later. "The legal team is already working on the nonprofit status. We are ready to run." I opened my laptop and typed a quick email to the entire staff at Northbridge Equity Partners. Subject: Our new headquarters and mission. Team: Today we closed on the Silverhaven estate. We are not flipping it. We are keeping it. Effective next month. This will be the site of the Silverhaven Academy. We are going to build the ladder that many of us had to build for ourselves. Get ready to pack boxes. We are moving to Ravenwood." I hit send. Almost immediately, the Slack channel on my phone began to light up. Emojis, exclamation points, gifs of people celebrating. Maya, my forensic accountant, replied, "I am actually crying at my desk. Do you know how many times I was told I didn't look the part? This is incredible." Reading her words, I felt a lump form in my throat. This was why I did it. It wasn't about the lanes. It wasn't about proving Loretta wrong, although that was a satisfying side effect. It was about the fact that talent is distributed equally, but opportunity is not. I stood up and walked to the large window of the conference room. It overlooked the front courtyard of the auction house. Down below, the parking lot was emptying out. The luxury SUVs were pulling away, but near the fountain, a small cluster of people remained. I squinted against the glare of the afternoon sun. It was them: Loretta, Owen, Brielle, and Kayla. They were standing in a circle, arguing. I could see Owen gesturing wildly with his hands, likely blaming everyone but himself. I could see Loretta clutching her purse, looking smaller and older than she had just an hour ago. From this height, they looked like miniatures. They looked insignificant. For years, they had been the giants in my life. They were the gatekeepers who decided if I was worthy of love or food or shelter. They had cast a shadow so long that I thought I would never find the sun. But looking at them now, I realized they were just people, flawed, scared, greedy people who were trapped in a prison of their own making. I didn't hate them. The hate had evaporated the moment the gavel fell. What I felt now was a profound sense of distance. I was up here, signing contracts that would change lives. They were down there, wondering how to spin this defeat so the neighbors wouldn't pity them. "Ms. Mata," Elena called out from the table, "we have the final transfer tax document ready." I turned away from the window. I turned my back on the Lane family and the parking lot. "I am coming," I said. I sat back down and picked up the pen. The ink flowed. The deal was done. The 19-year-old girl who had sat on a bus, terrified and alone, was gone. She was safe now, and in her place was a woman who had just bought the future. The transformation of Silverhaven Manor did not happen quietly. For the next 4 months, the estate was filled with the sounds of sawing, drilling, and the shouting of contractors. To the neighbors, it might have sounded like chaos, but to me, it sounded like a heartbeat returning to a body that had been dead for a long time. I was there every day. I wore jeans and boots, walking through the dust-filled corridors with the lead architect, a woman named Elena, who understood exactly what I was trying to do. We were not erasing the history of the house, but we were repurposing it, the massive formal dining room, where the Lanes had imagined hosting stiff, aristocratic dinners, was stripped of its heavy drapes. We installed floor-to-ceiling whiteboards and modular tables. It became the strategy hall, a place for brainstorming and collaboration. The dark, brooding library, which had been filled with books nobody ever read, was converted into a digital research center. We kept the oak shelves, but filled them with legal texts, urban planning guides, and financial journals. We ran high-speed fiber optic cables under the floorboards. I made sure the carriage house, once the servants' quarters, was given the most attention. We knocked down the dividing walls to create an open-concept co-working space for female founders. I wanted the light to flood in. I wanted it to be the brightest place on the property. "Are you sure about the glass partitions?" Elena asked me one morning as we stood in the ballroom. "It breaks the Victorian aesthetic." "I do not want secrets in this house," I told her. "I want transparency. I want every woman who walks in here to see that she is not working alone. The Victorian era was about hiding things behind walls. We are about tearing them down." As the physical structure changed, so did the narrative surrounding it. The local press, and then the regional business journals, began to pick up the story. Initially, they just wanted to know who the mystery buyer was. When my PR team finally released the official statement, the headlines shifted. Mysterious investor. Quinn Mata transforms historic estate into women's real estate incubator. From foreclosure to future, the new vision for Silverhaven. It was the first time in my life that I saw my name in print not as a debtor or a dependent, but as a founder. I read the articles on my tablet. Sitting in my temporary office on the second floor, they called me visionary and the operating partner. They described my background in data analysis and my philosophy of ethical investing. I knew who else was reading those articles. 30 miles away in Mapleford, the Lane family was watching. I did not need a spy to tell me their reaction. I knew them too well. Loretta would have sat at her kitchen table, clutching her coffee cup, reading the words, Founder Quinn Mata, over and over again until they lost their meaning. It would have caused a cognitive short circuit. In her mind, I was the girl who needed to be saved. I was the charity case. If I was a success, then her entire worldview and her perceived superiority was a lie. And Loretta Lane did not tolerate lies unless she was the one telling them. News traveled fast in a small town. A former neighbor of theirs, a woman who had always been kind to me when I was a teenager, sent me a message on social media. She included screenshots of what the Lanes were posting. I scrolled through them, feeling a mix of nausea and exhaustion. There was a photo of Owen on Facebook, sharing the article about me. His caption read, So proud of my cousin Quinn. We always knew she had that killer instinct. The Lane business gene runs deep. Can't wait to see what we build together. Then there was a post from Brielle on Instagram. It was an old, grainy photo of us at a family barbecue when we were 10. I looked awkward and shy. She looked polished. The caption said, Throwback to the early days with my favorite cousin. Growing up together, we always pushed each other to be great. So happy to see her finally making it. Family is everything. And the pièce de résistance was from Loretta. She had been telling people at the grocery store and the hair salon that she had been my silent partner all along. She was spinning a tale that my time living on her sofa was actually an intensive mentorship, where she taught me the values of hard work and thrift. They are rewriting history, I said to Miles Carter one afternoon as we inspected the landscaping. They are literally pasting their names onto my resume. Miles looked at the screenshots on my phone and shook his head. It is parasitic. Quinn, they realized they missed the boat. So now they are trying to swim after it and grab the rudder. What do you want to do? We can issue a cease and desist. We can publicly clarify that they have zero involvement. No, I said, watching a gardener plant white hydrangeas along the path. If we fight them publicly, it becomes a tabloid drama. It becomes Family Feud at Silverhaven. That distracts from the academy. It cheapens the mission. So you are just going to let them claim credit? Miles asked, clearly annoyed on my behalf. I am going to let them try, I corrected him. My source tells me they are planning a grand entrance for the opening gala next week. They have bought new outfits. Loretta has purchased a large, ostentatious gift, some kind of crystal vase, I hear. They plan to walk in, hug me in front of the cameras, and cement their status as the family behind the success. I turned to look at the main house. The scaffolding was down. The limestone was scrubbed clean. It looked majestic, but not forbidding. Let them come, I said. I won't ban them. That would make me look petty and fearful. They can come as guests. But Miles, make sure the security team understands the boundaries. They do not get a microphone. They do not get a seat on the dais. They are general admission, nothing more. Landon Pierce flew in the day before the opening. We walked through the finished halls together. The smell of fresh paint and new carpet was strong. You took the high road, Landon noted, referring to the Lanes. That is dangerous. Narcissists do not like the high road. They try to pave over it. I am not worried about them hijacking the event, I said. The truth has a way of being very loud without shouting. They can tell whatever story they want on Facebook, but tomorrow, in this room, the reality will be undeniable. That night, the eve of the opening, I stayed late at Silverhaven. I sent the staff home at 8 o'clock. I wanted to be alone in the house. I walked to the grand foyer. The chandeliers were dimmed to a warm, golden glow. I stood in the center of the room, listening to the silence. It was different from the silence of the auction. That had been the silence of tension. This was the silence of anticipation. I walked over to the reception desk, where a bronze plaque had been mounted on the wall. It read, "Silverhaven Academy, dedicated to the resilience of those who build their own way." I ran my fingers over the cold metal letters. I closed my eyes and let the memory wash over me one last time. I was 16. I was standing at the sink in Loretta's kitchen, scrubbing a roasting pan that was caked with grease. My hands were red and raw. In the living room, I could hear the television and the laughter of my cousins. They were watching a movie. I hadn't been invited. I remembered the feeling of smallness, the feeling that I was an invisible component of their machinery, useful only for cleaning up their messes. I opened my eyes. I was standing in a mansion that I owned, about to launch a foundation that would change hundreds of lives. The Lanes were coming tomorrow. They were coming with their fake smiles and their rewritten memories, hoping to bask in the light I had created. They wanted to stand next to me and pretend that we were the same. But we were not the same. I looked at my reflection in the glass door of the entrance. "You are not going to be angry tomorrow," I whispered to myself. "You are not going to be bitter. You are going to be the truth." I turned off the lights in the foyer. The house did not go dark. The security lights outside bathed it in a soft, protective illumination. Tomorrow was not just a party. It was a trial. The Lane family was coming to present their case, that they were the loving, supportive creators of Quinn Mata, and I was going to present my case, simply by standing there and telling the story exactly as it happened. I walked out to my car, the gravel crunching under my boots. The air was cool and smelled of the coming autumn. I felt a strange sense of peace. The ledger was balanced. The stage was set. All that was left was for the actors to take their places and for the curtain to rise on the final act. The morning of the Silverhaven Academy grand opening, the sky was a brilliant, unblemished blue, the kind that looks like it has been painted on specifically for the occasion. The air was filled with the hum of conversation, the clinking of china, and the electric energy of 200 people who believed they were witnessing the start of something important. I stood near the podium in the main ballroom, watching the room fill up. There were venture capitalists from the city, journalists with recording devices, and local community leaders, but the guests of honor were the 30 young women in the front row, the first cohort of fellows. They looked nervous and excited, holding their binders like shields. Looking at them, I saw 30 versions of myself at 19, hungry for a chance that the world had told them they did not deserve. Then, the doors swung open, and the atmosphere shifted. The Lane family had arrived. They were 20 minutes late, a calculated move designed to turn heads. Aunt Loretta was leading the charge, clutching a bouquet of lilies so large it looked like she had uprooted a garden. Brielle and Kayla were dressed in evening gowns that were far too formal for a morning brunch, shimmering with sequins under the daylight. Owen walked behind them, his chest puffed out, scanning the room for anyone important enough to shake hands with. I watched them work the room. I could hear snippets of their conversation drifting over the crowd. "Oh yes, we are her family," Loretta said loudly to a reporter from the Business Journal. "We always knew Quinn would do something special. We gave her the foundation she needed." "She is practically my sister," Brielle told a potential investor. "We grew up in the same house. We share everything." I felt a muscle in my jaw tighten. It was exactly what I had expected. Yet seeing it play out was nauseating. They were trying to steal the narrative. They were trying to paste their faces over my struggle. My assistant, a sharp young woman named Sarah, leaned in close to me. "Do you want me to have security remove them? They are disrupting the flow." I looked at them. I saw the desperation behind their smiles. They were terrified of being left out. "No," I said calmly. "Let them stay. Treat them like regular guests. But Sarah, make sure they do not get seats in the front row. The front row is for the fellows and the board. Put the Lanes in row 10, behind the cameras." Sarah nodded and slipped away. I watched as she intercepted them. I saw Loretta's smile falter when she was guided away from the VIP section and toward the general seating. She looked offended, but she sat down. She had to. To cause a scene now would shatter the illusion of the supportive aunt she was trying to project. 10 minutes later, I walked up to the podium. The room went silent. I adjusted the microphone. I looked out at the sea of faces. I saw Landon Pierce nodding at me from the side. I saw the young women watching me with wide eyes. And in the middle distance, I saw the Lanes, leaning forward, ready to be acknowledged, ready to stand up and wave when I inevitably thanked them for their love and support. "Welcome to Silverhaven," I began. My voice was steady. "People have asked me why I bought this estate. They asked why I chose to turn a private mansion into a public school." I paused. "I did it because I know what it feels like to have a door slammed in your face." The room was perfectly still. "I did not grow up with money," I continued. "I grew up in a house where I was reminded every day that I was a guest, not a member. I grew up believing that my value was measured by how invisible I could be. When I was 18, the small fund my mother had left for my education was taken from me. It was used to pay for someone else's mistake, because in that house, my future was considered expendable." I saw Loretta stiffen. Brielle stopped smiling. "I left that town with 2 suitcases and $42, I said. "I scrubbed floors. I worked night shifts. I learned to read the market because numbers were the only things that didn't lie to me. I built my career not because of a safety net, but because I had no other option." I took a breath. But I was not entirely alone. I gestured to the side of the stage. "I would like to invite Mr. Arthur Henderson to the stage." He was my mother's attorney. "Mr. Henderson walked up, looking frail but dignified. He took the microphone. "Thank you. Quinn," he said, his voice raspy but clear. "Elaine Mata was a woman of foresight. She set up a bond trust for her daughter, structured with a specific clause. If the family ever misappropriated funds from Quinn's primary accounts, the bond trust would trigger and vest immediately to Quinn. That happened 12 years ago. The capital that purchased this building today did not come from a family inheritance in the traditional sense. It came from the protective measures a mother took to ensure her daughter would survive the greed of others." A ripple went through the room. People were whispering. The narrative had shifted instantly. It was no longer a story of a wealthy family producing a successful daughter. It was a story of a survivor outsmarting a toxic environment. Mr. Henderson stepped back. I took the podium again. "So," I said, looking directly at row 10, "this academy is not built on family money. It is built on justice. It is built on the idea that no one should have to lose their future to pay for someone else's vanity." The applause started slowly, then swelled into a roar. It was thunderous. People stood up. They weren't clapping for a rich real estate mogul. They were clapping for the truth. The Lane family remained seated. They were frozen. If they stood up now, they would be admitting that they were the ones who had stolen the money. If they clapped, they were applauding their own exposure. They sat there, small and gray, while the room celebrated around them. The ceremony ended, and the crowd broke into groups for champagne and networking. I stepped off the stage and was immediately surrounded by well-wishers. But Loretta Lane was a fighter, or perhaps she was just in denial. She pushed her way through the crowd, dragging the giant bouquet of lilies, with Brielle and Owen in tow. She marched right up to me, ignoring the reporters who were trying to interview me. "Quinn," she announced, her voice shrill and overly bright. "Oh, honey, that was quite a speech, very dramatic." She thrust the flowers at me. "Aunt Loretta is so proud of you," she said, loud enough for the nearby circle to hear. "We always knew you had this fire. That is why we were so tough on you, to prepare you. Come here, let's get a picture for the paper." She reached out to hug me, gesturing for Owen to take a photo. She was trying to overwrite the last 20 minutes. She was trying to force the happy family visual that would run in the local Gazette tomorrow. I did not step back, but I did not accept the flowers. I let her arms hover in the air. "No, Aunt Loretta," I said. The chatter around us died down. People turned to watch. "What do you mean?" Loretta asked. her smile freezing into a rictus of panic. "Don't be silly. Quinn, it is a celebration." "I just told the room the truth," I said, my voice calm, level, and kind. "I told them where the money came from. I told them why I left. Everyone here knows exactly what happened." "Well, you know how memory is," Loretta laughed nervously, glancing around at the staring faces. "We all remember things differently. The important thing is that we are here now. Family is family." "You are right," I said. "You are my family. You are the people who taught me that I had to save myself. I am grateful for that lesson, but I do not need you to edit the story to make yourself look better. The story is done." I looked at Brielle and Owen. They couldn't meet my eyes. "I am not angry," I continued. "I am not going to ban you from the grounds. You can walk around. You can see what I built, but you do not get to claim it. You do not get to stand on this stage and pretend you held the ladder. I built the ladder while you were laughing at me." "Quinn, please," Owen whispered, seeing the reporters raising their cameras. "People are watching." "I know," I said. "Let them watch. It is good for them to see what reality looks like." I signaled to Sarah, who stepped forward and gently took the flowers from Loretta's hands. "Enjoy the refreshments," I said. "The catering is excellent." I turned away. I didn't wait for a response. I didn't wait to see if they stormed out or if they stayed to eat the free food. It didn't matter. Their power over me, the power to make me feel small, to make me crave their approval, had vanished completely. They were just guests in my house. I walked through the crowd, nodding to the investors, shaking hands with the mayor, until I reached the French doors that led to the South Terrace. I stepped outside. The noise of the party faded into a dull murmur behind the glass. The air was crisp. From the terrace, I could see the great lawn stretching down to the iron gates. I saw a group of the new fellows sitting on a stone bench near the garden, their heads bent together over a laptop, laughing and talking rapidly. They were planning. They were dreaming. They were starting. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the scent of pine and limestone. I looked toward the main gate. I saw the Lane family's car pulling away. They were leaving. They were going back to Mapleford, back to their small stories and their mounting debts, back to a past that I no longer lived in. I turned my back on the gate. I looked at the academy. The lights were on in every window, glowing warm and bright against the twilight. I smiled. The debt was paid. The house was mine. And for the first time in my life, the future didn't look like a struggle. It looked like an open door. I walked back inside, leaving the cold air behind, and stepped into the light. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Please drop a comment below and let me know your location and what you thought of Quinn's journey. If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to the channel Lila Revenge Stories. Hit that like button and smash the hype button to help this video get recommended to more people. Your support means the world to us.